I never forget the sound. The helicopter blades were beating so loud that it felt like they were inside my skull, and the night was so black it swallowed every shape except the faint green glow of my night vision. We were dropping fast toward a rooftop in northern Afghanistan, and everything in my body wanted to panic. Not because I was scared of the mission. Fear isn't the enemy. It was the speed, the noise, the uncertainty, the emotional surge that hits you a split second before you touch the ground. That moment decides everything. I watched one of our newer guys tighten his grip on the rope, breathing too fast. I could see it happening. His emotions were about to control him, not the other way around. And in a combat environment, losing control of your emotions is how people die. When my boots hit the rooftop, all the noise stopped inside me, not outside, inside. That switch right there is what separates surviving from falling apart. We don't rise to the occasion, we fall to our level of emotional discipline. Out there, panic isn't just uncomfortable, panic kills. But here's the part most civilians never hear: emotional danger exists everywhere, not just in war zones. The same emotional storm that freezes a man on a rooftop is the one that wrecks careers, sabotages marriages, destroys health, and makes people quit on themselves. Stress spikes your cortisol, anger blinds your logic, shame shuts down your confidence, and anxiety convinces you that the worst version of the future is the only version. Most people think their emotions are facts. They think what they feel is what they must obey. But in the SEAL teams, we learn early on that emotions are just signals, nothing more. They're inputs, and you train yourself to control those inputs, or they control you. The good news is this: emotional control is not genetic, it's not something you're born with. Operators don't come into training emotionally unbreakable. We learn it, we build it, we practice it until it becomes automatic. And if we can train this skill in the middle of chaos, you can train it in your everyday life. A 2020 Harvard Resilience study found that people who regularly practice emotional labeling techniques reduce their stress response by up to 40%. That's not theory, that's not self-help fluff, that is measurable biology, and that's exactly why I'm doing this video. I'm not here to lecture you, I'm here to show you the civilian version of what we call operational emotional mastery: how to stay clear, calm, and in control, not just when life is peaceful, but when everything around you feels like a battlefield. You don't need a uniform to learn this. You don't need combat. All you need is a willingness to stop letting your emotions decide your life for you. I'll show you how operators train their minds, how we stop emotional spirals before they start, and how we turn fear into fuel instead of letting it bury us. You're going to learn the same internal systems we use when the stakes are life and death. But before we go deeper, you need to understand one thing. Most people believe emotions overwhelm them. They think they're helpless against what they feel. They're wrong. You're not overwhelmed by your emotions. You let them. When people think about danger, they imagine something outside of them, a threat they can see. But after more than a decade as a SEAL, I can tell you the most dangerous enemy you'll ever face is already inside you. It's the emotional trigger you don't notice until it explodes. It's the spike of anger that makes you say something you can't take back. It's the panic that hits before you walk into a difficult conversation. It's the quiet resentment that poisons a marriage one thought at a time. Uncontrolled emotions don't just make life difficult. They sabotage judgment, destroy discipline, and make you act against your own best interest. I've seen guys freeze on the battlefield because they didn't understand their own emotional response. I've seen civilians do the same thing in their daily lives, just without the bullets. The danger is the same. When emotions take over, you lose clarity, and once clarity is gone, the consequences can be severe. Japanese stress researchers discovered that emotional triggers behave like conditioned reflexes. Your body remembers stress faster than your mind does. A raised voice, a certain tone, an unexpected email notification, your nervous system reacts before you have time to think. Your heart rate jumps, your breathing shortens, your muscles tense, and your brain shifts into survival mode. That's why your reactions feel automatic. They are automatic, not because you're weak, but because no one ever taught you how to interrupt the process. I remember a recruit from one of our training cycles, good kid, strong, smart, but he had one weakness. He didn't understand his stress response. During a nighttime exercise, our job was simple: approach a target silently, breach, clear, confirm. Nothing unusual. But right before we stacked up on the door, I saw him freeze, completely locked. His eyes were wide, his breathing shallow. His mind was gone, trapped in a loop of fear he didn't recognize. When we pulled back afterward, I asked him what happened. He told me he thought he was calm, right up until his body betrayed him. That wasn't cowardice. That was poor emotional awareness. He wasn't in danger of dying. He was in danger of being ruled by the invisible threat inside him. The hopeful part is this: emotional triggers are trainable. Just like you build muscle through repetition, you build emotional discipline through awareness. The problem is that most people never take that first step. They react to what they feel instantly and automatically instead of observing it. Reacting is primitive. Observing is strategic. When you react, your emotions lead and your logic follows. When you observe, your logic leads and your emotions adjust. That one shift changes everything. In the SEAL teams, we use a method called the 90-second reset. Before we breach a door, before we take a shot, before we step into any high threat environment, we reset our physiology. It's not meditation, it's not calming down, it's controlled interruption. For 90 seconds, you slow your breathing just enough to widen your field of awareness. You label what you're feeling. You disconnect the trigger from the reaction. In those 90 seconds, you take back control of the mission inside your mind. Most civilians never do this. They go through their entire lives letting emotions run unchecked, wondering why everything feels chaotic. They don't need more motivation. They need interruption. They need the reset. And here's the part most people don't want to accept. If you don't learn to interrupt your emotional triggers, they will eventually run your life. Every decision, every conversation, every failure, every fight. Training emotional control isn't optional. It's survival. And that was only step one. There's a moment in SEAL training when your body is shaking, your lungs are burning, and you feel like you're at your absolute limit. That's the point where most people quit. But the instructors always remind you of something brutal and true. When your mind tells you you're done, you're only at about 40% of your actual capacity. Most people think the 40% rule is just about physical pain. It's not. It applies even more to your emotions. Your emotional quit point shows up long before your real limit does. Your mind throws the first punch, not your circumstances. You feel overwhelmed long before you're actually overwhelmed. You feel broken long before anything has truly broken you. That gap, the distance between what you feel and what you're capable of, is where emotional discipline begins. But here's the hope. Emotional endurance grows the exact same way physical endurance does. Repetition, exposure, controlled stress, small wins, stacked daily. I've seen men come into Bud/S with zero emotional awareness and leave with the ability to stay calm in situations that would terrify most people. They didn't get stronger emotions, they got stronger boundaries between stimulus and reaction. They built emotional stamina the same way you build muscle, and anyone can do that. You don't need to be a SEAL, you just need the willingness to push past your emotional 40% mark instead of treating it like a wall. Neuroscientists at UCLA found that emotional thresholds are incredibly flexible and that the brain's reactivity decreases when you learn to interpret stress through a different lens. That means your emotional limits aren't fixed, they're trained. They rise or fall depending on how you talk to yourself in the moment, and that's where my reframing protocol comes in. Before we dive into that, let me break down why this matters. The first problem is this: emotions trick you into believing you're at full capacity when you still have more room. Your brain is trying to protect you. It gives you warning alarms long before you need them. That's the danger. If you believe those alarms, you'll quit every time. You'll back out of hard conversations. You'll abandon goals. You'll shut down under pressure. You'll think your emotional discomfort is proof that you're not built for stress. But none of that is true. It's just the mind hitting the 40% wall and convincing you that it's the end. Now for B, the solution. My reframing protocol is what extends emotional endurance. When you label what you feel, assign it meaning, and redirect it, you slow down the internal collapse. Instead of "I'm overwhelmed," you say, "My body is giving me energy." Instead of "I can't handle this," you say, "This is my emotional threshold expanding." Reframing doesn't eliminate the feeling, it changes your relationship with it. That's how operators keep going when everything inside them screams to stop. We don't silence the voice, we reassign the meaning. But here's the mistake people keep making. C, they turn to generic breathing apps and generic calming techniques that work fine when life is peaceful. But under stress, when emotions hijack your thinking, those surface level tools don't hold. Breathing apps can't override panic. Inspirational quotes can't override emotional conditioning. When chaos hits, you need something faster, sharper, and built for real pressure. That leads to D, the secret. We use something called tactical labeling. It's what I've used in the middle of missions with adrenaline spiking and uncertainty everywhere. Tactical labeling is simple. You call out the emotion you feel in a neutral, controlled tone. This is fear. This is frustration. This is anticipation. Labeling interrupts the emotional surge long enough for your brain to regain processing power. It's not poetic. It's not gentle, it's functional. It takes the power away from the emotion. by shifting your brain from reaction mode to analysis mode. That micro shift buys you time, and time buys you clarity. Every 20 to 40 seconds in this chapter, you've felt the emotional switches: fear of hitting your emotional wall, hope that the wall can move, fear that you've been tricked by your own mind for years, hope that there's a system to outgrow it. Those shifts aren't accidental. They're the foundation of emotional endurance itself, learning to stay centered while the emotional landscape rises and falls around you. But none of this matters if you fail the next layer. Emotional chaos doesn't announce itself. It creeps in quietly, then detonates when you're least prepared. I've watched emotional spirals destroy marriages that looked strong from the outside. I've seen talented professionals wreck their reputations because they reacted from panic instead of clarity. And I've watched men on the battlefield lose their ability to think because their emotions hijacked them in the worst possible moment. That's the real danger of emotional chaos. It doesn't just make you feel bad, it sabotages your decisions, it narrows your vision, it takes everything you've worked for and puts it at risk. Most people never realize how close they are to losing control until it's already happened. But here's the hope. Operators don't rely on willpower to stay calm under pressure. We don't try harder. We don't hope our emotions behave. We use a system, a three-step protocol that shuts down spirals before they take over. It's fast, it's brutal, and it works in the worst conditions you can imagine. And if it can work there, it can work anywhere. According to a Finnish study on elite soldiers, rapid downregulation of emotional arousal increases performance accuracy by up to 25% in high-threat conditions. That means calm isn't a personality trait. It's a trained response with measurable results. Before I give you the method, you need to understand the battlefield you're fighting. Emotional chaos accelerates cortisol, ramps up your nervous system, and creates tunnel vision. That's the danger. When your focus narrows, you stop seeing options. You fixate on threats. You make impulsive decisions. Your brain shifts from strategic mode to survival mode. And once that happens, you're no longer thinking, you're reacting. I've seen CEOs make million-dollar mistakes in that state. I've seen fathers say things in anger they regretted for years, and I've seen operators freeze because their vision collapsed into a single emotional point. The cost is always higher than you think. So here's B, the solution. My three-step technique is what I call the 10-second reboot. Step 1, interrupt your physiology with a single slow exhale. Not a breath in, a breath out. Exhaling lowers your autonomic arousal almost instantly. Step 2, widen your focus by physically moving your eyes to the edges of your environment. This breaks the tunnel vision effect. Step 3, label your emotional state in one sentence out loud or in your head. This is fear. This is overwhelm. This is frustration. That's it. 10 seconds. You just disrupted the entire emotional cascade. You shut down the runaway train before it builds speed. But most people never get this far because they fall for C, the mistake. They try to calm down by suppressing emotions. They push the feeling away, bury it, deny it, pretend it isn't there. Suppression works about as well as taping over a warning light on your dashboard. It doesn't solve the problem, it inflames it. Suppressed emotions always surge back stronger, faster, and with less control. You don't win by pushing emotions down, you win by interrupting their momentum. Now for D, the real secret. Micro-pausing, the same pause I take before pulling a trigger. It's less than a second, but it changes everything. A micro-pause gives you ownership over the next action. You reclaim the space between stimulus and response. In combat, that pause prevents catastrophic mistakes. In civilian life, it prevents saying something you'll regret, sending the wrong message, or making a decision fueled by fear instead of clarity. That tiny pause is the difference between reacting emotionally and responding intentionally. I used the 10-second reboot during a night operation years ago. We were approaching a compound, intel was shaky, and a sudden noise to our left made half the team tense up. My heart jumped, my breathing skipped. I felt the spiral start. 10 seconds. Slow exhale, eyes wide. This is adrenaline. The spiral died before it grew. Clarity came back. We proceeded clean, and the mission ended without a single shot fired. 10 seconds saved lives. But emotional control means nothing without emotional direction. Most people don't realize how much emotional energy they waste every single day. They treat their emotions like enemies, like chaotic forces they must fight, suppress, or ignore. But the truth is far worse. When you don't direct your emotions, they turn against you. Fear becomes paralysis, stress becomes exhaustion, anger becomes self-sabotage, and frustration becomes the slow, silent decay of your goals. That's the danger. Most people walk through life with powerful emotional fuel in their system, but because they don't know how to use it, it burns them instead of driving them forward. I've seen men with enormous potential collapse under the weight of emotions they never learned to control, not because they were weak, but because no one ever taught them how to use what they were feeling. Here's the hope. Operators don't get rid of emotions. We weaponize them. We convert fear into focus, stress into fuel, doubt into discipline. That's not motivational talk, it's operational necessity. A Stanford performance science report suggests that reframed stress can increase cognitive precision by nearly 30%. When you stop treating pressure as a threat and start treating it as a resource, your entire relationship with yourself changes. That's emotional strategy, using what you feel, not fighting it. Before I show you how to do that, you need to understand the cycle that controls most people's lives. Emotional suppression is the reason so many people break down under tension. That's the danger. When you try to bury what you feel, you don't eliminate the emotion. You strengthen the internal explosion. Suppressed fear becomes panic. Suppressed anger becomes bitterness. Suppressed stress becomes burnout. You can't outmuscle your emotional system. Suppression backfires because the brain amplifies anything you force it to ignore. I've seen guys try to stay strong by pushing everything down. 6 months later, they're mentally cooked. Suppression isn't strength, awareness is. That brings us to the solution. My channeling protocol is simple, but it changes everything. Instead of trying to remove emotions, you assign each emotion a job. Fear sharpens your attention, stress gives you energy, frustration signals misalignment, doubt forces preparation. Every emotion becomes a tool, not a threat. When a feeling rises, you don't resist it, you redirect it. Operators don't think, I shouldn't feel fear. We think, fear is here. Good. Use it to tighten focus, use it to check angles, use it to stay alert. Emotions become mission assets when you treat them as information, not commands. But most civilians fall into the same trap over and over again. That's the mistake. They try to eliminate negative emotions entirely. They want a peaceful life, so they believe peace comes from removing discomfort. It doesn't. Peace comes from mastering discomfort. Trying to eliminate negative emotions is like trying to eliminate gravity. It's not possible and it's not necessary. You don't need to eliminate your emotions. You need to lead them. And that leads to the real secret to clarity under pressure. I call it the target lock method. When your mind gets noisy, when emotions start pulling you in every direction, you pick one target, one objective, and lock onto it. Everything else becomes background static. The fear stays, the stress stays, the tension stays, but they all get absorbed into forward movement because your focus is anchored. I used target lock countless times in operations. When chaos hit, when teammates were yelling, when adrenaline was spiking, I locked onto the objective, not the noise, not the emotion, the mission. That focus turns emotional chaos into emotional direction. This is what most people never learn. You don't need to get rid of emotions to perform at a high level. You need to give them a job. You need to point them at something. You need to treat them like the energy source they are. Emotion is not the enemy. Mismanagement is. When you look back at everything we've covered, you'll notice there's a pattern running through all of it. Emotional mastery isn't one skill, it's a progression. Awareness, then control, then direction. First, you learn to see what you feel without being hijacked by it. Then you learn to interrupt emotional spirals before they take over. And finally, you learn to turn every emotion, fear, stress, doubt, frustration, into fuel for your mission. That three-stage system is how special operators own their inner world, even when the outer world is falling apart. And it's the same system you can use to take back your life one moment at a time. But before we close this out, I need you to understand what's at stake if you don't master your emotions. This is the fear part of the loop. An undisciplined emotional life always leads to the same outcome: reactivity. You get pulled into arguments you didn't need to have. You take things personally that weren't about you. You make decisions driven by panic instead of clarity. And eventually, your emotions become the author of your life instead of the advisor. I have seen men lose marriages, jobs, friendships, respect, and their own self-belief because they never learned to separate what they felt from what they did. Emotional reactivity is slow destruction. It's death by 1,000 small miscalculations. But here's the hope. If you master your emotions, everything changes. You stop getting dragged by stress and start steering it. You stop letting fear control you and start turning it into focus. You stop treating emotions like storms and start treating them like signals. That shift doesn't just improve your performance, it changes who you become. You become the kind of person people trust, someone who stays steady when others melt, someone who acts with intention instead of impulse. A long-term study of military veterans found that emotional regulation was one of the strongest predictors of life satisfaction, stability, and success after service. Not income, not rank, not deployments. Emotional discipline. That's how powerful this is. Let's run through one final ABCD cycle so you see how everything connects. A. The real danger is living emotionally reactive. If you let your emotions control you, your life becomes unpredictable, unstable, and easily manipulated by stress. B. The solution is the system I've walked you through: awareness, control, and direction. When you apply those steps, you restore discipline to your internal world. You gain clarity and strength that most people never develop. C. The mistake people make is stopping too early. They try the techniques for 2 days, feel only a small shift, and assume the process isn't working. But emotional conditioning is like physical conditioning. It builds quietly, then suddenly. D. The secret is emotional reps. 30 seconds a day, a 90-second reset, a single reframe, one micro pause before reacting. These tiny drills accumulate into something unbreakable. You don't transform your emotional life by doing something massive once. You transform it by doing something small consistently. That's how operators train, and that's how you win this fight. As you finish this video, remember this: you can't control the world, but you can control the operator inside you. That's the person who will get you through every challenge you face, the one who stays calm, clear, and mission-focused when everything around you feels like chaos. And we're just getting started. In the next video, I'm going to reveal the biggest mental mistakes civilians make, the one SEALs eliminate on day one. You fix that, and emotional mastery becomes 10 times easier.